SABC News International Editor, Sophie Mokoena, who is standing by. Sophie, one of the things that it seems, I mean, when you think about what has been happening right now, there's a lot of reaction to this particular decision. But was this route of bringing back these particular diplomats, withdrawing them and saying that they're coming back home for a consultation, was it an avoidable decision?
Well, you know that it was in 2018, after the ANC took a resolution to close the embassy of South Africa in Tel Aviv, where the South African government decided rather to recall the ambassador, Sisangomban, at that time, and left certain senior officials to continue the work, particularly to assist people, South Africans who might be in that region, but also business people who have ties with that country. And therefore, now it is another step where they have decided to recall the diplomats. These diplomats include charge d'affaires, Mr. Machaba. It includes the first secretary, it includes the third secretary for corporate services. And therefore, this is another step perhaps for South Africa to demonstrate that they are really not supporting what's happening in the Middle East currently. The bombardment yesterday, that was quite heavy, and South Africa had to take a stand. Perhaps for me, what is the other important matter is when will the minister have a meeting with the Israel ambassador to South Africa. We know that tomorrow the minister will be in Cape Town, where there is a debate around this issue of the Middle East, and perhaps when she's back in Johannesburg and also in Pretoria, she can then meet with the ambassador to take this matter forward. But it looks like South Africa is really demonstrating its resolve to ensure that they do express the view of Pretoria in relation to how Israel has behaved thus far in relation to this conflict.
And especially when you read that statement from Cabinet and listen to what was said earlier on, that they're expressing disquiet at the ambassador's, what they call disparaging remarks. And of course, it'll be interesting to see if that meeting does happen. But another interesting development that Sherwin was telling us about is the consultations in the UN Security Council and now happening behind closed doors. And one can almost assume that this might be an issue that is also raised behind closed doors, and also interesting to see then what is also said behind closed doors about what is happening in Gaza.
Well, clearly in relation to the Security Council, it will only be the 15 members of the Security Council. South Africa is not a member of the Security Council. You know that Africa doesn't have a permanent seat in the Security Council. You have these seats allocated to Africa on rotational basis, and currently we are not part of the countries that are in the Security Council. I think here it's bigger countries, particularly your permanent five, those who veto powers, whose voice will be loud and clear. As the ambassador of China has indicated, you know, that China is currently the chair of the Security Council. So you are looking at those powerful countries. You know that the United Arab Emirates is proposing a resolution, and of course the buying in will have to be particularly directed to the P5. But as Sherwin pointed out, you have the senior diplomat of the United States of America in the Middle East currently, and therefore America is going to use its power to ensure that you don't have a breaking story or breaking news at the Security Council. Over the weekend, most of the media houses missed a big story. That big story was that there was voting, and during the voting, Ukraine abstained. Let us be clear, it didn't vote yes or no, but abstained when that resolution was presented, and only Israel and America voted against that resolution, and majority of member states of the Security Council and also of the UN voted for the resolution, and therefore there's a shift. And it's not only in relation to a higher level at government level or diplomatic level, but also ordinary citizens of the world. We saw those protests around the world. Even today there are huge protests, particularly in cities where you have powerful nations who are part of the Western powers, the allies of America and Israel. And therefore, I think there's a shift, and it looks like Israel is not aware that there is a shift.
And of course, earlier on, that another story that we've been covering here has been the minister meeting with her Ukrainian counterpart. Let's talk about that and what came out there.
Well, clearly this was an important engagement. As you know, that Minister Naledi Pandor met with the Foreign Affairs Minister of Ukraine at some point in time in Portugal, and they agreed that they will continue. And this is a continuation of that. But for me, what was critical in terms of what came out of that meeting, when the Minister of Ukraine pointed out that the relations between Africa and Ukraine cooled down since in 2018, around there, and even earlier. And therefore, they are trying to strengthen their relations with the continent, not only with South Africa. But during the engagement with media, I did ask the minister in relation to the peace process whether there is a possibility that Ukraine and Russia can engage in peace process. He told me that with no uncertain term that not now, because the reality is Ukraine is adamant that here you are dealing with a fight for autonomy and independence and respect for territorial integrity of another country. And Russia is not willing to understand that approach, and therefore there is no glimmer of hope in relation to seeing the leaders meeting, the President of Ukraine and the President of Russia, and therefore, but acknowledging and accepting that what Africa has done this year in terms of visiting Ukraine and Russia was a right move, and that has sort of assisted Ukraine to understand that Africa is an important region and they must continue to strengthen their relations. So we don't know. I don't think we will see any meeting of President Zelensky and President Vladimir Putin in a near future. So now you have two wars, one in the Middle East and one in Eastern Europe that is in Ukraine, and therefore the world is really, really in serious crisis.